Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to my reaction channel. My name is Teddy90, and today we're going to be reacting to why Japan's geography sucks. I don't know why Japan's geography would suck. Isn't Japan? I mean, it is mostly mountainous, but you would think. I don't know. I don't think Japan's geography would suck. This video is created by Real Life Lore. Go up to them and go like their video if you enjoy this type of content. I don't really know what is going to be discussed here, so let's just jump into it. You can see the other video that I was planning on doing today. I might get around to doing it. Is the Zimbabwe's currency crisis, so you might see that come up later. Yeah. All right, let's just jump on into it, ladies and gentlemen. Let me lower the volume because last time it was way too loud.
This video was made possible by CuriosityStream. When you sign up at the link in the description, you'll also get access to Nebula, the streaming video platform that Real Life Lore is a part of.
Sure.
For over 100 years now, Japan has been one of the world's most powerful civilizations. Her impact on culture, technology...
100 years? No, Japan's rise came somewhere in the 1860s or 70s with the Meiji Restoration. They really started to throw their weight around in the early 1900s. When did Japan take over Korea first? When did vaping start? Okay, give me a second. That also needs to be on our list. When did Japan invade Korea? Because it was Korea first. When did Japan... no, not that time. I mean, like, the time that they actually, like, did it. Korean Empire became a protectorate in 1905 and formally annexed in 1910. Okay, yeah, it wasn't... I guess it kind of was 100 years ago, wasn't it? Just over 100 years ago. Yeah, no, yeah. That's so weird to think about, isn't it? That Japan, the mighty empire that it was, and then it obviously got beaten, and then it turned into an economic empire. It's just so weird to think that it's really only been 100 years, and it's made such a massive impact on the world. Because before the 1900s, Japan was incredibly isolationist because of the Tokugawa dynasty, I believe. They were incredibly isolationist. It's insane that only within 100 years did Japan, like, completely reshape the political spectrum of the world. Not to say Japan wasn't important before that, but they were incredibly isolationist, so they wouldn't get involved with anything. Now, on to the when did vaping start. Commonly invented by 2003 by a Chinese pharmacist, Han Lok. Okay. Weird. I don't know why I cared about that. And I totally forgot we were talking about with Japan.
Society has been among the greatest in history, but all of this is despite...
Oh yeah, Japanese culture and its extremely rapid growth.
Civilization's spawn point being not necessarily the greatest.
Yeah, it's also, if you look at how fast Japan turned around from, let's be real, a medieval feudal state, to a complete and utter 180 turnaround to a modern, able to kick Russia's ass in a war type of modern state. Like, that is a fast turnaround. When was the Meiji Restoration versus don't judge my spelling. Meiji Restoration 1868, and then Japan Russia War. Yeah, 1904. So 80, was it 68 or 86? 68. So that's 46 years to go from a completely and utterly backwards medieval state, or very near close to a completely and utterly backwards medieval state, to, no, fuck you, to being able to beat Russia in a war. That is a change.
The core of Japanese civilization has always been based around the Japanese archipelago in the Pacific Ocean. Japan has...
Their religion, Shinto, is based on the islands, right? Can you really be Shinto? Isn't that like a thing? Like, you can't really be Shinto outside of Japan, since Shinto is so intrinsically tied to The land.
always been an island civilization, and modern day
It's very animist, I believe.
Japan consists of 6,852 different islands, although there's really only 4 important ones that you need to know about. Hokkaido.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna guess Hokkaido, and I do. I have them in my brain, but my mind immediately went blank when I tried to name them. I have them in here. I'm not. Do I wait and see if they pop up in the video in a timely manner? I have them in here. Oh my god. It's the whole when you just like immediately forget what you're gonna say. Okay, let's just let the video
Honshu, Shikoku, and Kyushu. All of these islands combined give Japan a land area that's roughly equivalent to the US state of California, but it's a lot more spread out than that. If you place Japan off the east coast of the United States, the southernmost islands would be south of Miami, while the northernmost would be above
Sorry about
Halifax.
I'm getting a bit sick.
And unlike California, Japan has a population of nearly 127 million people, more than 3 times the population in California. However, most of this population is concentrated into just a few small areas on the island of Honshu, and a topographic map helps to explain why. This is Japan's first major geographic weakness. The home islands are absolutely covered with mountains. 73% of Japan's total land
That is a beautiful picture.
area, in fact, is mountainous, which means that most of Japan's land is incredibly difficult and expensive to develop for human habitation. With only
No, Java, go
27% of our land not being covered by mountains, it means
Java decided to pop
that
up.
despite being much larger in overall territory, Japan has about the same amount of livable and workable land that South Korea has.
Yeah, mountains. I don't know if I talked about this in another video, but mountains make it very, very hard for civilizations to come around. Not that civilizations can't rise from mountains, obviously. Japan did. The Incans are doing it. But mountains make things so much harder because it's it's not only what like livable areable space, it's also being able to get communication from one place to another, right? If you're trying to make a road through a mountain, it doesn't even matter who's trying to live in the mountain or whatever. If you're trying to make a road through a mountain, you either need to go over the mountain, around the mountain, or like up and around the mountain, or through the mountain. All of those are incredibly expensive and incredibly human labor dependent. So trying to have an empire, like manage this, if this was like land bound or whatever, this would never been able to become a country. Well, that's not saying much because the Incans did it, but like it would be much harder and there would be a much more regional divide. Like culture in Japan would be a lot more divided if they didn't manage to push through being able to get through the mountains. Like there's a reason why mountain ranges are natural borders to things. Like if you look at the Korean Peninsula, the natural border of the Korean Peninsula is the mountain range. I'm afraid I don't know what it's called, but in North Korea, the mountain range here between China and Japan, China and Korea, that is the natural borders, and that's why the nation of Korea formed up like it did, because it had a natural border and natural border, natural border and natural border. Regardless of how bad these water borders are, it had natural borders. You can see the same. Well, you saw the same with Russia until they decided to start colonizing throughout Siberia. If you look at the Urals, and you look at throughout most of... I'm not going to show you the map. But if you look at the Urals... no, I will show you the map. Moscow. Urals. Yeah, Urals, Moscow, Ural Mountains. This isn't a very good map, but the Ural Mountains goes through like this, and while the Khan was in control of this, while like the Mongols and things like this were here, and even before them, the Russians never really went much past the Ural Mountains. That was their natural, that was like the Rus-Slavic border, because the mountain range made it completely natural. There are other things like this, like Italy with the Alps. You can see where Italy's culture got isolated in an almost sort of way, apart from the fact that they were extremely expansionist and conquered everything. But they could have easily become like a Korea, never really conquering anything or doing anything because of the natural borders. But they didn't because Rome. There are other things like it, like Spain and France. Obviously, you can get through here, and there's more things like this, but mountains are natural borders. So that's why if Japan and other nations like Japan with the mountainous terrain and everything like that, if they wouldn't be able to build roads and things like that, they'd have been a lot more cut off, and like the culture would have been a lot more split. The Incans had the same issue, but I won't get into the Incans now because I have been rambling about things.
Most of the Japanese population is, therefore, crowded and stuffed into highly concentrated, dense urban areas across the scattered plains in between the mountains, like the Nobi Plain, home to 7 million, or the Osaka Plain, home to over 19 million. Japanese civilization historically was based around the Osaka Plain with the capital in Kyoto before it was moved to the larger, more strategic, and more productive Kanto Plain in the 17th century. The Kanto Plain is the largest single area of flat land in Japan with the highest potential.
The Tokugawa moved it to Edo, or Tokyo. No.
For agriculture and cheap expansion.
No, Edo was the old capital, yeah. Moved it to Tokyo.
And it's why today, the plain is home to the largest urban area in the world, Tokyo, home to 3 out of every 10 Japanese.
I think Tokyo means like Western City or something like that. No, Eastern City or something like that. I think yeah.
38 million people concentrated into an area the size of Kuwait. All 3 of these plains are home to massive urban areas because of their flat land and location nearby to bays that allow for easy trade and transportation. And Japan has always had to rely on trade to maintain her status as a great power, because the biggest weakness in Japan's geography is maintaining her enormous...
Oh, yeah, you're right. He's entirely right about why Japan's geography sucks. It's not because Japan's geography sucks. It's because Japan has no natural resources within its borders. Or at least not enough for what it needs to do. That's the entire reason Japan was so expansionist during World War II. And it was pushing for things because it wanted to become self-reliant, not rely on trade, because it was going with the mercantilistic, nationalistic idea that nations need to make as much as they can within their borders without going to trade with other nations. Which, to be fair to Japan, not excusing any of the things they did, but to be fair to the Japanese politicians at the time, that is what formed the basis of all the great European empires. But then the European empires all became so big that trade was almost needed. Like their countries became, and their economy became so developed because they had much longer to do it, that free trade and everything else like that became things. So expansion in that way no longer became important to them. But Japan's political philosophy, while their industry, military, and other things like that were way sped up and managed to catch up to the Europeans, their political philosophy was still the old empire building that the Europeans built their empires off of, because Japan wanted to make sure it had all of its resources within its own borders. Which, by this point, all of the other great powers, for the most part, have switched over to a certain extent to free trade and not so much blatant, rampant expansion. This was during World War II. They developed this personality way before World War II, but this is what caused the head in World War II, the difference of, honestly, political philosophy and empire building. Because they were going with that old philosophy of mercantilism that you needed everything in one area instead of the other way around. Not excusing any of the atrocities they did, but let's be fair here. That is how all European empires were built. The Japanese just did it at the point when the majority of the world's morals had shifted on that issue, to put it lightly. And to put it bluntly, what Japan did was evil, and what the European empires did to build their empires were evil, but Japan was just late to the party.
Population on an island that doesn't have enough resources to sustain it. Only 12% of Japan's land is arable and suitable for farming, compared with 25% of the UK's land, 34% of Germany's land.
Yeah, all of World War II wasn't really based off of food for Japan. It was oil, iron, steel, and sulfur, and things like that.
Land or
rubber.
53.
Japan doesn't have natural resources.
80% of India's land. The Japanese islands are also famously poor in natural resources, with
Yeah, there it is.
virtually no oil reserves, natural gas, coal, or minerals. Therefore, Japan has always had to look abroad for the resources to feed her population and fuel her economy, either through trade or through conquest.
Yeah, those were the two ways. And as I said before, more modern countries, at least during World War II, had shifted away because of the disastrous World War I. They had shifted away from having massive empires because they were less sustainable because they got damaged. But Japan was still on the old philosophy, and that's why I thought it could eat up all of the old colonies that the other empires were ditching. It was a literal embodiment of survival of the fittest, but in nation states, which is not a great philosophy to have. Survival of the fittest. It has had a lot of bad people wield it.
Japan currently relies extremely heavily on imported foodstuffs and fossil fuels, and for a time, the government tried to offset this dependence by switching to nuclear power. In 2010, 25% of Japan's electricity came from domestic nuclear energy production, but Japan's other great geographic weakness intervened: a severe vulnerability to natural disasters. The 2011
That's also a great point. Japan is in, it's in the Ring of Fire, I believe, the thing that has all the volcanoes. I think I'm technically in it too, but I'm far enough inland that, whatever. But yeah, Japan just gets constantly bombarded by just storms because it's right in the Pacific. It just constant.
earthquake
It's like the Florida of the Pacific. Well, no, that's very insulting. But like it's like the Caribbean of the Pacific. It just constantly gets smashed.
and tsunami triggered a nuclear meltdown at the Fukushima nuclear reactor plant, and the resulting outcry and public opinion against nuclear energy led to the closure of every single nuclear power plant in the entire country by 2012.
Oof.
Today, only 4% of Japan's electricity comes from nuclear power, and the country is even more dependent on fossil fuel imports. And another disaster could strike again at any time. Japan is, after all, one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to natural disasters, and certainly the most vulnerable great power by a wide margin. The top two most expensive disasters in human history both took place in Japan. The previously mentioned 2011 earthquake and tsunami that caused $411 billion in damages, and the 1995 Great Hanshin earthquake that caused $330 billion in damages. Japan's geographic location is, unfortunately, at the intersection of 4 different tectonic plates that are grinding and scraping past one another.
I didn't know that. That would explain the constant earthquakes, though, because of plates like going up and under or hitting each other or whatever. Never was very good at geography.
Which often
So I will skip this.
causes huge earthquakes and devastating tsunamis. But those aren't the only disasters that Japan has to worry about. The intersection of these plates has also given the Japanese islands 108 current active volcanoes, 10% of all the active volcanoes in the world, which occasionally erupt to cause even more damage. The various natural disasters and rugged geography have made development in Japan historically difficult, but they also make any outside invasion of Japan a very difficult thing to accomplish.
Yeah, this is why Japan had a very easy time pretty much isolating itself. Because 1, it's an island. 2, it has a lot of great natural defenses to keep people out of its island. And 3, it's people in its culture. It was just able... It had a warrior culture. Sorry, it took me a while to process what my next thought was going to be. Yeah, it had a warrior culture, so it was able to throw it back. But it mostly, geography and things like that, built it to be a bit more isolationist. Kind of like how Tibet was pretty isolationist, and they're trying to conquer them. But Tibet went the opposite way. Instead of going super warlike, Tibet went peaceful monk, and was going for the Switzerland strategy, or Switzerland went for the Tibet strategy before Tibet got conquered by China. Anyway.
Throughout her entire history, Japan has never once been conquered by an outside power. And part of the reason for this is just because historically, Japan has been located pretty far away from all the other major world powers. China is located 800 kilometers away across...
Also, China didn't care for most of history. China was the extreme example of I'm just gonna not do anything and just kind of chill here. Like, they have everything they need inside of their borders, like, at all times. They're fine. They don't need to expand military. They have everything they need. They have enough food, they have enough land, they have all that other stuff. That's why their population's so massive, because China won the lottery when it came to where their land was. Granted, it also led to the whole idea of, wow, China is very easy to invade. If you, for especially nomadic tribesmen, which was the most common, just constant, just able to come through here, get through here, go over here, or the Vietnamese coming up through here, things like that, or the Mongols coming through the desert. Although the desert here is a pretty great natural border. The Gobi Desert, I think, which Mongolia sits in, or at least part of Mongolia sits in, yeah. But yeah, China had so much resources that, like, it is super easy to invade, which is why so much of Chinese history is underneath foreign emperors. But yeah, so much resource rich. Well, Japan didn't get anything, but that's weird how that works, huh?
It's an open ocean, and the only major time an invasion came from this direction was when the Mongols attempted to invade twice in the...
And to be fair, that wasn't China invading. Let's make that clear here. That wasn't China invading. The Mongols just happened to have conquered China at the time, and we're probably using Chinese troops, but that wasn't China invading. That was just the Mongols being Mongols. The Mongols are gonna invade things. It's what they do. They don't do boats good, but they do invasions good. And their whole thing was just, gotta conquer the world. And boy, were they pretty damn close to being able to do it. If they wouldn't have all turned away at the time that, I think it was Genghis or whoever it was. I don't think it was Genghis. It was somebody else. Somebody died when they were invading through Europe, and they all turned around and left. But if they would have just kept going, or if he would have lasted like another decade, all of Europe would have fallen to the Mongols. Like, there was no way to stop the Mongols. If the Mongols decided to just be like, yeah, we're gonna conquer you now, there was nothing you could do. I think one of the few times the Mongols have gotten defeated, possibly the only time, was by the Mamluks. I can't remember what the battle was called. Mamluks-Mongol battle. Mamluks. Mamluks-Mongol battle. Don't judge my spelling. Battle of Angelut. Yeah, Angelut. I think, was this like the first time the Mongols lost a battle? First decisive defeat, yeah. Battle of Angelut, which is one of the few times the Mongol army actually got defeated. It got defeated by the Mamluks, which were basically the Egyptians at the time, which is why Egypt didn't get conquered by the Mongols. So, props on the Egyptians, honestly, full stop, for being able to stop the Mongol hordes. That is not that Egypt needs more marks of pride looking at its ancient history. Its modern history isn't great, but if you look at its ancient history, it has so many points of pride. But that beating the Mongols should definitely be up there for like for one of the top ones, because not many people, no one can really say that they beat the Mongols. The Mamluks and the Egyptians can at least have that, be like, we beat the Mongols. Like, our ancient history was great, and then we weren't great for a while because we kept getting conquered, but at least we beat the Mongols. But Japan probably would have lost to the Japan probably would have lost to the Mongols if the Mongols would have gotten on, because the Mongols. But ocean and typhoon. I think it was a typhoon or something.
Century, and failed twice from 2 different typhoons that destroyed their fleets.
Which has also made the Japanese of that era pretty damn religious. Unsurprisingly, they started very much believing in, like, they're even more so, because 2 times the Mongols, who they knew would just straight up conquer them if they got any foothold whatsoever. But 2 times, it seems like the gods were completely and utterly on your side. And really, they kind of were in this case, because they managed to destroy the Mongols twice. Like, once it's like, thank you gods. The second time it's like, well, our luck has run out. Then they do it again. It's like, alright, so the gods exist and they're 100% on our side. Got it. So yeah, that from what I understand, and this is my very, very limited understanding, but that definitely sparked a lot more religious fervor in Japan at the time.
Natural disasters can occasionally work in Japan's favor, after all. And
Yeah.
since Japan is located so far away from the troubles of Asia and the rest of the world, they have the option at any time to pursue a policy of isolationism, which they did for over 2 centuries.
See, China did that too, but it was in a terrible location to do isolationism. But they did it anyway. And if you look at their history, it didn't really work. Well, it did and it didn't. They just got conquered a lot. Or raided a lot. Living anywhere but like the middle of China, if you're in China, was probably a bad idea. Because living up here, you're going to get raided by Mongols. Living down here, you're going to get raided by the Vietnamese. Living on the coast, you're going to get raided by Japanese pirates. You just kind of want to be like here. You don't even want to be on the Yellow River because it floods constantly. China would be great to live in if you were like a peasant wanting to make food for yourself. What would be the best place to live as a peasant? Anyway, I'm completely off track. China nowadays, communism. I'm not going to get into that, but yeah, China does have really great geography.
Between 1641 and
I'll get back to you on what I think the best time period to live as a peasant would be. Apart from modern times, we don't count. We have disease control.
1853, when Japan had essentially zero contact with the outside world, and punished any Japanese person leaving the islands with death if they ever returned.
Yep.
But the lack of raw materials and farmland at home needed to supply her economy and feed her people has occasionally led Japan to pursue a very different policy of imperialism to conquer what she needs. And Korea has always been the first target. The peninsula is a logical choice for expansion because it's close to Japan's core. It can serve as a funnel for the Japanese military to push deeper into Asia from, and it's rich with natural mineral resources and arable land. A unified Japan attempted to conquer Korea once for these reasons before the isolationist period in 1592, and then again.
They were very, very close to succeeding, but then China got involved, and Korea had a brilliant admiral that pretty much stopped it. It was a brilliant admiral, China coming in, and just lack of support from the home. But Japan could have easily have conquered Korea if it wasn't for the admiral. Like, if they would have done it really fast, China wouldn't have reacted, because China of ancient times, or any empire of any size like this, has the whole issue of you're so big that you really can't react fast. It's like Russian World War One. Like, you can't, like boy, do you have a knockout punch, but it takes you a while for you to push yourself up off the ground so you're able to like actually do it. Once you get going, you're pretty much unstoppable. But it takes China or Russia and other places like that a while to wound up. So if Japan would have won in a blitzkrieg throughout Korea, China would have been able to mount enough of a defense because it would have taken them so long to be able to even like get anything out there.
In 20th century, after the end of the isolationist period, Japan's rapidly industrializing economy in the 20th century demanded things like oil, coal, steel, and of course, food, all of which Japan's geography has relatively poor amounts of. And so, Japan set about on decades of conquest and war to secure those resources.
Yep.
She conquered Taiwan from China, defeated Russia and conquered Korea, attacked Germany and conquered her Pacific islands, attacked China again to conquer Manchuria, and then eventually invaded all of China. It was a dangerous addiction that Japan struggled to satisfy, because every attack that Japan made resulted in even more international sanctions that
Yeah, here's the thing. Again, going back to the point, that is what built every other empire before it. Japan's political philosophy was just outdated at the time that they were doing it. If they would have done this 200 years earlier, like, the rest of the world would have cared because they would have wanted that stuff themselves. But no one would have judged them. If anything, they would have disliked them because they were Asian. But, like, the European powers would have been envious and, like, probably trying to invade China itself. Japan's political philosophy, the main reason we view it as evil today, because it was evil, is because it was emulating what everybody else has done throughout all of human history. It just did it in a time when that was no longer acceptable. This is why I think the British Empire was evil, the French Empire was evil. Like, any empire has great evils it committed, just like the Japanese did. The Japanese were just late to the party.
Restricted her ability to trade for resources and continue her wars. When the US embargoed Japan in 1940 and cut off her oil supply, the Japanese military calculated that they only had 2 years left of oil in their reserves before they ran dry and couldn't continue. The need for oil placed on them by their geography and trade restrictions caused the Japanese military to commit to invading Indonesia and the Philippines, which would eventually bring in basically the entire world against them. Japan overextended themselves all across the Pacific, and with rapidly depleting reserves of oil and coal that they couldn't possibly replenish back at home, they inevitably lost against a massive coalition that they couldn't have ever hoped to defeat. But the allies of the war faced the same problem that the Mongols faced in the 13th century. Invading Japan itself really sucks. Japan planned a massive, all-out defense of their home islands that probably would have cost the Allies millions of casualties. So rather than dealing with that,
See, the Mongols totally would have dealt with that. They wouldn't have cared. They'd have conquered them.
the US resorted
The Mongols don't care.
to dropping the atomic bombs, and Japan surrendered without it ever coming to that. In the aftermath, Japan
My god, can you imagine a world where the Mongols got a nuclear bomb and they knew how to use it? They'd have used that on everyone.
lost all of her imperial conquests since her industrial revolution, and was once again confined to the meager resources and farmland of the Japanese home islands. Japan continues to claim the southern Kuril Islands, however, which were annexed by the Soviet Union and later Russia after the war. And because of that dispute, Russia and Japan have still, to this day in 2019, never signed an official peace treaty ending the Second World War between them. The Japan of today, however, manages its geography struggle by trading for its resources rather than conquering them. Japan has since specialized in automobiles, electronics, industrial equipment, and robotics, and trades these specialized goods for the raw materials and foodstuff that she desperately needs. 84% of Japan's energy and 50% of her meat is imported from other countries, and she is the world's largest importer of natural gas, second largest coal importer, second largest agricultural importer, and third largest oil importer. It's safe to say that Japan still struggles with her geographic limitations and still deals with them by seeking out resources abroad, just in a different manner than she has in the past. Of course, the way that Japan attempted to solve her geographic limitations in the past through conquest was not justifiable. However, if you want to see a much
Not justify. That's an interesting way to put it. Not justifiable. Is anyone empire building ever justifiable? Like, was Britain right to end up giving massive amounts of territory to the East India Company and letting them conquer chunks of India, or things like that? Japan just did it in a time when it wasn't acceptable anymore. History's weird like that.
more in-depth video explaining how and why Japan
Makes you wonder if we're gonna go back to that.
fought World War II and how her
Like, it would be terrible, but like most of human history was conquest. Makes you think that, is this just a small blip in the rest of human history?
geography hurt
Who
and
knows?
helped. You should check out Apocalypse, the Second World War next on CuriosityStream, a glorious 6-part documentary series that explains the full history of the Second World War through archival footage that has been painstakingly colored in so that you can see the events the same way as the people who lived through it actually did. This is just one of thousands of titles that you can watch on your desktop, smart TV, iOS,
That does actually seem like a very interesting story to watch.
Android, Apple TV, Roku, Chromecast, and more platforms through CuriosityStream. They're the perfect site for anybody who likes being entertained and taught something at the same time. But what's even crazier is that they made their annual subscription even better.
I like letting him do the ads so they get paid. I let letting the ads run, so we're just gonna run through the ads.
By including a subscription to Nebula. Nebula is the streaming site that I and a bunch of other creators started as a place to try out new things on a platform purpose-built for educational content. All new real-life lore videos go up there ad-free, and there's also a bunch of original exclusive content from different creators, such as my car show. To get all of that, all you need to do is sign up for the annual plan, just $19.99 per year, at curiositystream.com/reallifelore, and then you'll get get an email with a link to get your free Nebula subscription. Also, you'll be supporting all of these independent creators continue to independently create, which is pretty cool. And as always, thank you for watching.
Alright, cool. Well, that was a great video. I definitely got a bit rambly there, so apologies for that. If you liked this video, go like his video, go sub to Real Life Lore. He deserves all the love and happiness and everything else like that. If you liked my take on it, my commentary, my ramblings, all that other good stuff, leave me a like. Go sub, go join my Discord, go join my Twitch, all that other good stuff. Yeah. Please leave comments about what you liked, what you didn't like. I like hearing feedback. People are going to continue using the like and dislike bar. Fine, I don't really care. But if you do have complaints with what I do, please leave them in the doobly-doo. I appreciate. I would rather get constructive criticism than just dislikes. But that's enough out of me. You don't want to hear more of my little cake-hole. So love, butts, and happiness, and all that other good stuff. I'll see you in the next one. It might be this one, depending on if I feel like it later tonight. Bye, y'all. I'll see you when I see you.